all of God's good things. And many of you know God has been good to you. But I can clearly assess God has been good to me. And God has been good to Wildwood Baptist Church and Sherwood Baptist Church as well. God has been good to all of us. Even when people suffer, God has been good to them. Even when people encounter tragedy, God has been good to them. They don't think so oftentimes, but He has. God is good, and God has given us promises. And so we rely upon these promises. And as we go through these, I want you to think about some of these promises God has given us. God has given us the promise that there will one day be no more death. No more sorrow, no more crying, neither shall there be any more pain. The former things shall be washed away. They'll be gone. Revelation 21:4. Now that's quite a promise, because everything God says has come to pass. But He tells us this too will pass, and it'll pass forever. And we're looking forward to it. As you age, you start having more pains, problems, and difficulties. You start seeing more and more of your family and friends pass away. That clock starts ticking, just like Solomon said in Ecclesiastes chapter 11. You start seeing the signs of aging. Your memory is not quite what it was. Your eyesight is not what it was. You start to have little problems. Your blood pressure sometimes goes up a little more often. You start having other little sugar problems and other types of things come on. Old folks used to always say it, and now you say they were right. They were right. Those pains and aches that you had when you were young and you thought you got over them, well, you start to revisit them. They start coming back. That shoulder you injured at 19, you start feeling at 48. It starts coming back. You start being able to tell the weather better than the weather forecasters. You're able to tell when it's coming. You have days that are sometimes difficult and sometimes they're prolonged. And yet God has still been good. It's hard to see a time when God hasn't been good to everybody, in spite of the fact that we oftentimes don't feel good. Sometimes you don't feel good, but you still know God is good. The fact that you don't feel good doesn't mean God isn't good. God is still good in those times when you don't feel right. When you feel bad, when you're suffering. There was once a lady that I pastored in her early 60s. She came down with cancer. And this cancer grew and it developed, and she was to die of it. It was mortal. And she was one day laying on her bed, and her husband went to visit her. And she was really in a lot of pain. And she just rolled over and she said these words: well, I guess if Jesus bore what He did, I can handle this. You have to have perspective. Perspective, and that's where faith comes in and trust. God told us this. Another reason you know God is good, that there's nothing that happens to us as humans that God didn't already say would happen. Nothing. He told us in John 16:33, tribulation will always be with you, but be of good cheer, I've overcome the world. You're going to have problems, you're going to have difficulties, you're going to go through all of those type of things. He told us that. It's nothing He didn't tell us. It shouldn't catch us by surprise. We still suffer, it's still difficult, it's still hard, it still causes pain. But He told us. He never lied. He told us in this world you're going to have tribulation of all sorts. Physical tribulation, personal tribulation. You're going to have troubles within, troubles without. You're going to have fears, fightings, all types of things go on. But at the end of the day, He also promised another reason for God's goodness. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Never leave you nor forsake you. God's word can be verified, it can be trusted. He doesn't lie. In this world, you have all types of people that lie to sell products, to sell themselves. False prophets telling you that child's going to live when it's going to die. False prophets telling if you come and give me a little bit, then I can heal you of your disease. You'll have financial success in moments. God will bless you this way and bless you that way. And people are so desperate to want it, they fall into those traps. They listen to it and they give over to it. And then when it doesn't happen, they're devastated. People use these situations to try to capitalize on them at your expense. But God never lies. Nor does He ever fail. He tells us exactly what's going to go on. There's another reason that God is good. There is no problem on this earth that glory is not so much greater than it's not even a problem. Paul tells us that. Romans 8:18, 2 Corinthians 4:17. I reckon that the sufferings of this present world are not worthy to be compared to the glory that shall be revealed in us. In case you thought Paul didn't know anything about suffering, there's lots of lists to go by. And I look at them, and I think that when you're in trouble, and when you're down, and when you're low, you need to recount those lists. Look at them carefully. Look at them hard. He talked about that. Trouble on every side, yet not distressed. Perplexed but not in despair. Persecuted but not forsaken. Cast down but never destroyed. Always abounding in the work of the Lord Jesus. In all patience, afflictions, necessities, distresses, stripes, imprisonments, tumults, labors, watchings, fasting, by pureness, by knowledge, by long suffering, by kindness, by the Holy Ghost, by love and faith, by evil report and good report, by dishonor and honor. In all these things, God is faithful. I like the perspective. Because without the perspective, we think, oh, that ain't true. But God is good. God is good. He's good all the time. Not only does he make his sun to shine on the evil and on the good, he sends his rain on the just and unjust. He's not making a mistake. He can cause it to rain on just righteous people if he wanted to. He can let other people not have anything. He can do like he did with Moses and the Egyptians. He can have all the plagues come on them and keep his own people safe. He can isolate you and keep you all right and let other people go down. Like it says in Psalm 91, 1,000 shall fall at your side and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come nigh you. So don't think just because the sun's got to be there, you're just sneaking by and God doesn't know the difference. God is good to you. You might despise his goodness. You may not neglect his goodness. You may not give him glory for his goodness. But he is being good to you. And he's not being good to you because you're good. He's being good to you that you will see his goodness and become good. Another reason God is good is he allows us to partake in his goodness. It's not just that he's good, he's training you to be good. You see, we think we're good already. Oftentimes unbelievers believe they're already good enough. I don't need religion. I don't need organized religion. I don't need to go to church. Hypocrites up in there. I can do better on my own. I trust my own mind. I'm not going to be brainwashed. I'm a free thinker. I don't let anybody tell me what's what. You're trying to free think your way out of death. Trying to free think your way out of illness. Trying to free think your way out of all the vulnerabilities everybody goes through. You don't have any control over that. If you did, you wouldn't. You're going to die like everybody else, and you don't know what's behind that veil, but our Lord does. And he teaches us that. And he never lies. You might guess that you're still going to go to that bar in heaven, and that everything you did on here is just going to carry on in bliss. That's just wishful thinking. You don't have anything to verify anything. Another reason I love the fact that God is good is he's no respecter of persons. In this world, I don't care who you are and how you are. Some of what you do and how you get and how far you go oftentimes is dependent upon who you are. It's dependent upon your color sometimes, and your status, your class, where you were born, how you were born, and all of that plays into it. But God's not that way. You got these black Hebrew Israelites trying to be Jews out there. You've got the Nation of Islam trying to identify for nationalism for African American people. And what they do religiously is oftentimes tied up into what they're trying to do politically. But the Lord Jesus breaks through all of that. And he brings justice. That's why people who never had a chance here, that's why there's a judgment. There's a judgment. No, you're not getting away with nothing. Everything done here is going to be accounted for. You may think God is not there because he allowed it to happen. But you're mistaken. Not one word or jot or tittle is going to pass from the law. You're going to stand there and you have to give an account of every idle word, Matthew chapter 12. You're going to give an account of every thought. Job said in Job 42, not one thought can be withholden from you. Everything we think. Jesus said that nothing covered that shall not be revealed. Nothing hid that shall not be made known. Everything's going to come out. I like the way Paul put it in Romans chapter 2, verse 16. He says he's going to reveal the secrets of men's hearts. The things God put in there, way deep down inside. He's going to bring it out on the table, and everything's going to be righteously assessed. That's why everybody can have hope. The worst person in this world, the most ill-treated, has hope. But the wicked ones, you have hope too, but you better grab onto it. And you better do it while you can. Because the same promises God makes for the righteous, the same promises are true for the wicked. God says the wicked shall surely die. There will be a time, and this is another reason to trust in God's goodness. There'll be a time when, as Job says, the wicked shall cease from trouble, and the weary shall be at rest. People that trouble you, people that despise you, people that continue to forsake the name of the Lord and put it down and do all of these things. There's one day it shall not be. Psalm 37:10, you're going to look around, and one day they're going to be gone. It's not going to be there anymore. Revelation 21:27, they're going to be outside the gate, and they're never going to come in. It's going to be all over. As Isaiah says, there is no peace to the wicked. Isaiah 57:21, 48:22. God's word cannot fail. That's why you pronounce his goodness. You can switch sides. You start off wicked, but the Lord calls you to righteousness. And he's good. He's good. God is able to reach low. No matter what happens, as we said before, Paul says, what shall separate us from the love of God if we love him? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or peril or nakedness or sword? He says, nay, in all these things we're more than conquerors. The world you live in doesn't believe that. That's why everybody's focusing on how far they can get here. They're trying to turn you away from that. They mock heavenly things. They say that's pie in the sky by and by. Let me tell you something, in a few years you're going to be in that by and by. It's not going to take long either. James says your life is like a vapor. It appears for a little time, it vanishes away. What you got here, 80, 90, if you're lucky, 100 some years, it's still nothing but a dash. As one man put it, you know what your life is? Say, what? Say, you ever been to a cemetery? Yes. You ever looked on the stone? Yes. What do you see? You see the number of a person's birth. You see the number of a person, the date of a person's death. And in the middle, you see the dash. He said, you're the dash. That's what you got. You're the dash. And you don't know how long that dash is. It may be long, it may be short, but it's still a dash. And it's going to fit on the tombstone. It's not very long. The older you live, the more brief you realize life is. It goes by very quickly. And you can't afford to be off. You can't afford to miss your purpose. You can't afford to not know it. And you're in a world that believes that truth can't be known. They believe that it's not absolute. They believe there's not necessarily one God. And they're proud about it. They're proud of their ignorance. They don't want it to be one God because he doesn't want to uncover their sins. They don't want to live by his rules. They don't want to do what he says. And so they don't realize by trying to save their life, they're losing it. But by losing their life, they'll find it. Jesus Christ came to give us truth and to give us righteousness. And he's the only one who makes it so. I often remember the story of Solomon when he asked for wisdom and God gave him wisdom. And you know the story of the two prostitutes. And they both had children within 3 days of each other. And one woman overlaid her child and it died. She got up in the middle of the night, she substituted her dead baby to the other prostitute's live baby and took hers. In the morning, the other prostitute woke up and she saw her baby was dead, but she considered that it wasn't her baby. And so now they go to court. Solomon takes the case and now they're there. Both of them are saying the same thing. That's how life is, isn't it? The lie always mimics the truth. The truth says stays where it is. And you're left to figure out which is. Both of them know the truth. Isn't that oftentimes the way it is? The lie knows the truth too. They're just not going to tell it. So they both get there and they're saying the same thing. The live baby is mine, the dead baby is hers. The live baby is mine. Nobody else was there. You had no other witnesses. Now it's a difficult case to figure out. And oftentimes that's how people are in this life. They look at religion and they say all of them are sounding the same. Who's to say which is right? Who's to say which is wrong? You can't tell. Therefore, let's just figure out, believe whatever you want, and that's good enough. Wrong answer. It seems right, but it's wrong. It seems like it makes sense, but it's wrong. I couldn't do that in math class. Not pass. I couldn't say I can't figure out these numbers. Give me a break, teacher. He said, no, you're going to have to learn the formula to get to the right answer. It's complicated. There are all types of numbers in the world. Well, you're going to find the right one. You don't find the right one, I'm still mark it wrong. Everything about knowledge is going from the general to the specific. But when it comes to religion, people like to go from the specific to the general. They don't want a real true God. And they think that by getting one, it's going to ruin their life. When actually it's come to save their life. They think God isn't good, and they trust in their own goodness. But they're going to die because all their righteousnesses are as filthy rags. Isaiah 64:6. God is good. He tells us all of this. We wouldn't have a clue if God didn't tell us. But he wrote 66 books. He gave us the Holy Spirit. He gave us the history. He gave us writings of church fathers. He gave us all of these things. And we got a lot of information. Whatever I don't know, I know some things. He gave us a peep into the future. And he gave us the past. We were born without our knowledge. And we're going to die without our ability to stop it. But in the middle, in the dash, this is how you live your life. Don't labor for things that perish. Labor for what's eternal. Makes sense to me. What profit does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? That makes sense to me. If I get everything but I'm not here, what good does it do me? He talks about things that make sense if you listen to him. He's more concerned about my soul than I was for my own. Isn't that something? And people diss him. Just like he's nothing. Lord Jesus, well, we don't know. King James wrote that Bible. It's been translated so we can't tell. We can tell all types of things. You're talking about you don't know. You don't want to know. Until I read Paul in Romans, I figured it out. I thought people just didn't know God. I didn't realize man's problem in sin was that he knew God, but he didn't want to know God. It's pushing God out that's the problem, not the fact that God wasn't in there. When they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were faithful. But they became vain in their own imaginations, and their foolish heart was gone. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like a corruptible man, and birds, and four-footed beasts, and creeping things. Wherefore God gave them up to the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. They changed the truth of God into a lie, worshipped and served the creation rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this cause God gave them up into vile affection. That's why when people do what they want, they keep going further and further. They don't even know whether they're male or female. They're going around mutilating themselves, and they call that progress. They're going around trying to identify, not knowing who they are, and they're feeling proud of it. Because they're lost. They're smart, but they're lost. They're dead in trespasses and sins. And that's why we have to shine the light. God is good. God could let that light go a long time ago. He keeps that light going. No matter how dark it is, he keeps that light going. In Israel's worst moment, he sent Elijah. In their horrible period of idolatry and Baal worship, he sent Elijah and Elisha. When the day when the children of Israel were slaves in Egypt, he sent Moses. You know, Moses wasn't supposed to make it in here. He was in the genocide era, where all the male children would be killed and thrown into the river. He just went through the cracks, as we call it. He escaped through the cracks. His mother saw him and hid him 3 months. When she couldn't hide him anymore, she had to put him out on the river. Made a little ark for him. Happened to be that God's providence kicked in. But it kicked in a way that only people that love God would see. It looked natural. All of a sudden, Pharaoh's daughter was there. She saw this little ark. And she looked at that and had one of her maidens fetch it. She opened the ark and this baby opened up and cried. And God knit her heart to that child from that point on. That was Moses. God made that happen. Wasn't no supernatural miracle, but I bet you Moses' his mother knew what happened. That's how it is in this life. Saints know what's going on. People in the world say that ain't no miracle. But God is moving. And a lot of times he's moving supernatural within the order of natural events. And people don't see it. But he's moving and he's doing things because God is good. He changes your direction. He suddenly maneuvers you into places you don't necessarily want to go. But later down the road you realize why he did it. You don't see it at the time. But God always is moving. You think he's not around. You think he's not listening. But he maneuvers things. You may not see it at the time. Just like Abraham didn't see that ram until after. He was going to slay his son. Just like Joseph didn't see God's purpose until after. They yanked him out of prison and he was made governor over the land. Just like Jacob didn't see what God was doing till that angel wrestled with him one day in his deepest fears. And he says, you prevailed. I'm going to change your name to Israel. Striven with God. He said, I'm not going to let you go till you bless me. I know the blessing of God is permanent. I know the blessing of God is good. I know the blessing of God is the answer to all my troubles. Another reason to believe God is good is he'll wipe all tears from your eyes. Not only does he talk about in Isaiah 65, he talks about in Revelation 7:17. He's going to wipe all tears. What am I talking about? I'm talking about oppression. I'm talking about people who go through hardships, and everybody does in some way. There's some things you go through in this life, and they're hard, but you can get through them. But there's some things in life you never get over. You live, but you still live with that pain. It's too deep, it's too hard. And no matter how long time has passed, that pain is still there. That wound will open up real easy. I always remember my mother in her 60s. She told the story of two of my uncles that I never met because they died at 2 years old. She was 16 coming home one day, and she saw the house burning. And her two sisters' babies, who were 2 years old at the time, were in that house fire. They would have been in their 70s by now. They would have been upward near 80. But they died in that. And whenever my mother told the story, tears would well up in her eyes. It's been years, but it's still there. Holocaust survivors. After seeing all of the evil they had to do, many of them had to take their parents and their uncles to the incinerator. They saw them starve to death. They had to partake in things they didn't want to do, but they were forced to do them. It's like a person who's raped. They're forced to do it, and yet they feel dirty from it. They have to live with the shame of something they didn't do, but the shame doesn't go away. He's got to wipe all tears from your eyes. There are things that you miss, and you wish you had them, and they're gone. Now listen to me. There's nothing God said wouldn't happen. He said that good and bad and chance happens to all. But there's still pains that only God can get down there and remove. And you're not going to find it through Dr. Phil. You're not going to find it through the psychiatrist. You're not going to find it through transcendental meditation. You're not going to find it. You can only find it in the cross, where Jesus can reach down deep into the soul that he created. God is good. And sometimes God forces your pain to turn you to him. God is able to use hard situations to make you godly. People are always concerned. What about God? Christians can't be the only way. What about people born in other countries? Never heard it. You worried about that? You don't know that? I said, well, listen to me. Let's say there's 7 billion people on this earth. A mother's daughter gets kidnapped. She goes to the police station. She says, I want you to find my daughter. I know what she looks like. I know everything. But I don't know where they've taken her. And suppose the investigator said, there's 7 billion people on this earth. I'm not even going to put manpower into it. You'll never be able to find your daughter. It's too many. Now, let's say he gave her a picture of 7 billion people. Do you think if the mother had enough time, she could pick out her daughter? Now, if a human can do it, how come God can't know us? Let me tell you what I do know. Over 7 billion people, nobody has or ever will or ever has had your fingerprints. Out of 7 billion people, nobody has, ever will, or ever has had your soul. Out of 7 billion people, nobody has, will, or ever has had your DNA. Let me tell you something. The God who made you knows you. The God who made you his. He knows the situation. He knows it better than you do. We don't trust his goodness. We don't trust that he's really for us. We think God has just set us up to fall. And it's up to us to make out whatever our lives would be. That's what the intellectuals of this world believe. That's what the academics promote. That's what people in church oftentimes believe. They believe this stuff. And God is good, but they don't believe it. Children of Israel didn't even believe it. God has shown his great power and his signs and wonders. The frogs, the lice, the hail, everything. And even then when they were scared, when Pharaoh's chariots were coming back upon them, they had no place to go. Mothers and children, old men, they were all there together, no weapons, and there was no place to go. They were in camp right by the sea. They couldn't go anywhere. And Pharaoh's chariots were coming down 60 miles an hour with all the weapons in the world. They didn't look too happy either. They had these evil looks on their faces. They were coming to swallow them up. They were coming to take them down. There was no place to go. And out of fear, the children of Israel cried out. They said, God has brought us out here to kill us in the desert. God has brought us out here to die. And you know, in life, sometimes those thoughts start to come into your head. When trouble comes hard, and when it looks like there's no reprieve and you don't see a way out, Satan tempts you to start thinking like that. Maybe God has let me down. Maybe he has left me. Maybe I did something to anger him. Maybe God is not here. And you start to entertain those thoughts. And that's how they were. And God looked at Moses. And God said to him, what are you standing there for? Lift up that rod. Lift it up. Lifted up the rod. And the sea began to part. God always has a way. Elijah was out there. He told Ahab there's not going to be any rain except according to my word. Well, he had to drink too. But you see, people that are passionate for God, they're not worried about how they're going to be provided. They're more worried that they get out what God says. In this world, we are the opposite. It really blows me away to see people. It doesn't matter how evil things are going in this nation. As long as the economy is working for them, they can stomach all of this immorality. They can stomach all of this ethical misuse. They can stomach it. It's okay with them. Jesus said, don't worry about what you're going to eat, drink. Don't worry about what you're going to put on. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. You're living in an age where people are doing the opposite. Even in churches, they're preaching God from a materialistic basis. Everybody's thinking finance when they come to church. Got the ATM machines out there. They come there and they have these long, drawn-out offerings. Everything is like that. Jesus drove out the money changer. Said, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all people. You made it a den of thieves. And so I'm just comparing. I'm looking at what God is saying, and I'm looking at what we're doing. And it's bothering me. I'm watching. Everything is based on that. We're talking faith, but we're always looking at profit. Everything is the profit motive. If we market these people, how much profit will it bring? If we do this, how much where does God fit into this? Well, you can talk faith all the time, but let me tell you, I'm looking at the people who know how to go through a famine. I'm looking for the people who know how to praise God in sickness. I'm looking for people who can praise God when things are not going well. I need to draw from them. We're in the wrong place. We don't always make that evaluation. And God is not pleased. And I believe that's why judgment's already on its way. We got some, we don't listen to them. It's going to have to be hardball. And even then, I'm not sure we're going to listen. But I know the nature of God. I know when you don't listen after a while, he starts up in the ante. And I know if you don't listen after a while, you're going to run into a Goliath. You know a Goliath? A Goliath is there to challenge everybody. And you're going to have to know the Lord to face Goliath. And if you've been playing the Lord and don't know him, you're going to just be stuck. 39 days Goliath was challenging Israel. All those men were trained in war. They were mighty men, but they couldn't fight this battle. Because they had to be one-on-one, and if they lost, everybody in the nation would go into slavery. So there was no honor in it. You see, God oftentimes sends a battle that you can't fight your way. Just like he did with Joseph, Pharaoh, Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar. He sends that type of battle that you only have to know the Lord to possibly have a chance. The world thinks they don't need the church. They think the church should just stay in its own four walls on Sunday, but don't come out. They don't realize the God of the universe is the God of everybody. God is not caring. He didn't send Elijah just to church folk. He sent him to wicked Ahab, the king. And he told them who was in charge. God, as the Lord lives, there shall not be due rain. But you got to believe it. Elijah didn't know where his next meal was coming from, but God gave him instructions after the fact. Isn't it important if we serve God and worry about provisions after the fact? We're so worried about provisions, it stops us from ever serving him. And let me tell you, get to the point where the people that serve him without provisions are people that are not afraid. You remember the man who was born blind in John chapter 9? He never knew why he was born blind and begging on the side of the road. Jesus and his disciples were passing by. The disciples said, Lord, who did send this man or his parents? that he was born blind. Because they taught in those days, if you had a handicap at birth, it's either you sinned in the womb, or it was like a generational curse. Somebody sinned and caused it to come upon you. Jesus said, neither, but that the works of God might be shown in him. What? I know that blind man was picking that up. Blind people can't see, but they can hear real good. And I'm sure they're used to hearing people talk about them that don't think they can hear them. And I'm sure he heard Jesus talk. Who is this man that's talking like he knows me? What is going on here? Next thing he knows, Jesus spits on the ground, makes clay of the spittle, puts it on his eyes, told him, make your way to the pool of Siloam and wash. The man knew how to get there. And then when he put that water on his eyes, for the first time he could look up and see. I wonder how that man must have felt. By this time, Jesus had conveyed himself away. He never saw him in the flesh at that point. But that's all that was needed. God knows how those balls will play out. All of a sudden, the community saw him and said, isn't that the man who was born blind? How does he see? Some were saying he's like him. Some were saying that can't be him. But he said, oh, it's me. Said, what happened to you? See, people don't know why they're asking the question. But God is leading the train. A man named Jesus, anointed clay. He told me to go wash, and I came and I saw. Wow, man starts to get popular. Not because they love him, but because of what Jesus did. You know, God knows how things play out. They brought him to the Pharisees who hated Jesus. And they said, what happened to you? He told them the same story. And they said, this man can't be of God. He did on the Sabbath day. He broke the Sabbath. The man wouldn't bite. He said, what do you think of him? He must be a prophet. They decided not to believe he had ever been born blind. That's how this world is. They rather believe in any theory than to believe that Jesus rose from the dead. 21 centuries ago, everybody knows it was a public execution. Everybody knows where he was buried. Even the heathen historians from Rome write it. And yet they also say Christians began preaching from Jerusalem that he died on the third day and would rise. I mean, he would rise from his death on the third day. And they never talk about it. I find that most fascinating. Secularists have a way of making sure they don't promote the things that would indict their lack of belief. So where does everybody go? So they start theorizing. Disciples came and stole it. How do you want to steal it? They weren't even there. And if they were, they couldn't steal it. They had a band of guards there waiting. And if they did steal it, they were the greatest thieves of all history. That in 21 centuries, nobody found what they did. What's the other theory? Oh, Jesus never died. Muslims say he never died. Somebody replaced him and made it look like it, but he never himself died. Oh, nice theory. Just doesn't accord with the facts. Other people say, well, it looked like he died. The disciples had this magic drug. They gave it to Jesus, and it simulated death. So it made it look like he died. And in 3 days, he woke up and said, what am I doing in here? He got up and by himself, weakened without having eaten, just getting up from the grave, moved that great stone and walked off, and we haven't found him since. Those are your theories. I'm just trying to tell you how creative people will go, not to believe the obvious. They want to convince you it's not obvious. They want to convince you it didn't happen. They want to convince you it's not historical. They want to convince you it's not provable. They want to convince you you can't know it for sure. All of it is a lie. Most of all, they want to convince you God is not good. God is good. You may not see it, but he has a way of finding it. He has a way of doing things that you can't see at the time. But he does them, and he works his circle. And you have to sit there and marvel, how'd you do that? You can't, it's right in front of your face, but you can't see it. It's like Samson. They caught him and cut his hair, blinded him. And right there at the stadium with the Philistines, they're drunk. They're laughing, humiliating him, making sport. They failed to look that his hair was going back. Right in front of their faces, but they didn't see it. They were so drunk with power, they can't see it. That's how this world is. They're ignorant of the things of God. It can be right in front of them, but they'll never see it. But the righteous will see it. They can understand because God shows it to them. You may not always see it for yourself, but that's because you're still in process. God purposely veils his answer to see if you want to trust him. That's why those things really require faith. He purposely veiled the ram from Abraham until it was after he obeyed. He purposely veiled the dream from Joseph until after he was in prison.
Yes, sir.
He purposely veiled the dream from all of the wise men and gave the full dream to Daniel.
Yes, sir.
God purposely veils it. You know what's coming in a general sense, but you don't know how he's going to play it out. But you learn to walk by faith, not by sight. And it's hard. And when it's hard, you start to get scared. And when you start to get scared, those questions start creeping into your mind. And they start creeping into your soul. And then Satan starts talking to you in one ear. He starts saying, you can't trust God. If God were there, he wouldn't put you in that situation. How did Job do it? Nobody told him anything. He got to the point where he was so frustrated. He wanted desperately to die. He never took the way out to curse God. I noticed that. Why didn't he take it? That was a sure way out. Even his wife couldn't handle it. And she said, you still maintain your integrity, curse God and die. Do you realize God is showing you a picture of your own life? That sometimes you get to those points where it's so dark, you can't see. And when you can't see, you get scared. And you're wanting God to show up, and it doesn't look like he's showing up. It looks like he's gone, and you're on your own. And you're hung out to dry. But you know what, people? You're still here. Somehow God worked it through. But do you believe he'll keep doing it? You believe he'll keep doing it? Out of 603,550 men that could go to war, with all God showed them in Israel, only 2 of them believed they could go into the promised land and defeat the giants. Out of everything God had done, 2 out of 603,550. You do the math. We're always talking about church growth, but let me tell you something. Discipleship, those who really trust God from those who often profess it, seem to be very few. And let me tell you, God is good. You're not alone. He's here to help you. He knows your weaknesses. The Holy Spirit is able to do things for you with utterances that cannot be, groanings which cannot be uttered. Romans 8:26. You're not alone. He's promised never to leave nor forsake you. He may not give you all the information, but you're going to have to trust him to know where you're at. And he's able to do it. He taught David that. David realized that even in his troubles, God is the one who redeems me out of all my distress. When Saul was after him, David knew how to fight an offensive war. He wasn't afraid of anybody. But how do you fight a defensive war? When Saul is out to kill you and you're trying to not kill him. He's got the whole nation after you. And that's like a Christian, isn't it? You're going out there to battle. The world has its carnal weapons, and they're outnumbering you, and they don't like you. You're out there, and you're not carrying your weapons, and you're going to have to trust the Lord. And oftentimes see that you're the victim, that you're not going to mess with this type of battle. He tells you to bless and not curse. The world curses and has no problem with it, but they're looking to accuse you if you curse one time. The world does things, and they figure you don't have to play by they can play by their rules, but you have to play by another rule. And they think they've got you surrounded. And you think that somehow truth is not going to really make it. And people believe oftentimes that they can't live holy and still make it. That there's not a way to always know. There's always a way to know truth. Going back to the prostitute story with Solomon, he couldn't tell who was telling the truth. The testimonies were identical. Is there a way to know truth when the truth and the lie look identical? That's the question. When I was a young man, I used to have conversations with my friends. I can't tell what truth is. Too many denominations, too many religions, too many things going on. How are you ever going to know? I remember when I was 16, the Lord impressed upon me one day. He said, you've got to find truth and you don't have much time. He didn't say it audibly, but it was in my spirit. Never forgot it. In those words, you've got to find truth. I didn't fully realize what he was saying, but he said, you got to start playing. You got to simmer it down. You got to know what it is and be able to stand for it, and you won't have a lot of time. That was over 40 years ago. And I remember that to this day. But I now know what he was trying to tell me. You can find it. Doesn't matter how the cloud looks. Just like you can know God is good, no matter how dark your life is. Doesn't matter if things are going horribly. If you feel weak, if you're ashamed, if you're humiliated, you're in things you can't understand, and it makes you angry sometimes. But fight from being bitter. God is still good. God is still good. And in closing, I remember the story of this man who was a plane pilot. For years, he flew pilots. He loved it. But one day, he had a crash, and he was paralyzed from his waist down. And this man was very bitter because that's all he ever wanted to do in life, and that's what he did, and it was taken away from him. And the man was angry. It affected his personality. He became grumbly and hateful. And he didn't speak to people with kindness. He was always bitter and angry. One time his neighbor decided to check on him anyway. He went there, asked him how he was doing. He grumbled at him and everything. And some people, it's hard to do good because they fight you so hard. But something is driving that. Something is driving their anger. Something is driving their bitterness. But the neighbor saw he was sitting there, and in his anger, he had the TV on, and he was just whittling with this knife out of anger. And she looked down and says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm just angry here and I'm whittling." And she realized that he was whittling these figurines. And this man became one of the world's foremost authority in figurine making. He was mastering a masterpiece, but in his anger, he couldn't see it. He was so bitter about where he was. He didn't see God was good. Oftentimes you can't see the forest for the trees. You're thinking in your own terms, and God is forcing you to think in other terms. And you aren't comfortable with that. But there's a reason to it. There's a reason for it. You don't like it at the time. But when it's all said and done, thank you. Thank you. Thank God. Thank you. God is good. Ain't God good? Amen. God bless you.